Hey guys, this is Dorian Day back for ADSR Sound, and today we're going to make a modern Hoover lead with Serum. Now today's video comes with a pack you're going to need to make the presets. A link can be found in the description of the video, and while you're on the way there, make sure to subscribe to ADSR's YouTube channel. Now before we start, I want to give you a little history on the sound. The Hoover, or screech as it's referred to in hardstyle, is one of the most popular and identifiable sounds in electronic music, and has been featured in countless pop and dance classics. The Hoover can be found in songs ranging from Warp 1.9 by Steve Aoki and the Bloody Beetroots to Bad Romance by Lady Gaga. This sound is so popular it has its own Wikipedia entry. If you go to it, it will tell you that the sound was originally called the Mintasm or Dominator after famous songs it was in, but eventually the name Hoover stuck because it sounds like a vacuum cleaner. It goes on to say that the Hoover is a complex waveform that can be created with 3 oscillators, each spaced an octave apart with heavy use of pulse width modulation and thick chorusing. The sound was originally created on the Alpha Juno, but can be recreated on a number of synths and VSTs today. So in even simpler terms than the Wikipedia entry, you take 3 high harmonic waveforms, place them an octave apart, and increase the number of voices and detune. Then place an extreme envelope on the pitch. This is the easiest and simplest way to achieve and describe the process of creating a Hoover. As the article states, it was originally achieved with high rate pulse width modulation, but this can be mimicked with voice detuning. Most of the character in the sound comes from the pitch sweeping and with the addition of chorus. So one thing you may have noticed in the description of the sound is that it requires 3 oscillators, pitched octaves apart. However, Serum only has 2 oscillators. At first this may seem like a problem, but Serum has a workaround. In the global pane, you can see that there's the stack option. This lets you change the intervals of stacked voices. 12 sets the voices between the fundamental and the first octave, and 12 times 2 sets the voices between the fundamental, the first octave, and the second octave. So basically this feature allows us to achieve octave stacking using a single oscillator. So what would have required 3 oscillators on most synths requires only 1 on Serum. And then you still get the second oscillator and the sub to add to the sound. This is the most fundamental aspect of the sound, so with that taken care of, we can start getting the rest of the patch ready. Let's finish changing the settings in the global pane before setting up the rest of the patch. Make sure you have 12 times 2 set on both oscillators, set width to 32 so that the sound doesn't become too wide with the addition of the other effects, and set stack to super so that the voices are spread more like a Roland JP8000, the grandfather of detuned dance leads. Back on the main screen, let's set our oscillators. Turn both oscillators on, then drag the supplied wavetable onto both. This wavetable has a few frames other than the standard square and saw I thought sounded good for this lead. Set wavetable position knob all the way to the left, and then set the voices to 15. That way each of the 3 octaves this oscillator is going to generate receives 5 voices. Set detune all the way to the left, and then set the warp mode on both oscillators to PWM, and set the knob to the left. Pulse width modulation was how the sound was originally created, but I think detuning tends to sound better on synths I've tried. Okay, all the envelopes remain default, but we use some LFOs. LFO 1 goes on the warp knob for both OSCs, more than halfway depth. Then set the rate of LFO 1 to free mode and turn it to 0 milliseconds all the way to the left. LFO 2 is being used as an envelope to shape the pitch of the sound, giving the movement. LFO 2 is a little trickier than usual, so I used Serum's ability to save shapes and share them. I saved the shape and added it to the resource folder you downloaded earlier. You load it by clicking the menu, going to Show Serum Presets, and then dragging the shape into the user folder in the shape folder. To make the shape available, you have to exit Serum's UI and reopen it. With that done, set the rate to 1/2 BPM and the mode to envelope. You can change the rate knob or the shape to make changes to the pitch movement. I'll show some of this at the end. Set LFO 2 to the coarse pitch control of both oscillators. Go into the mod matrix and set the depth of both to 19, unidirectional. Now let's set one of the most important settings of all for this patch, the EQ. Setting the EQ correctly is critical for achieving the final sound. The Hoover needs a lot of balancing to reach modern expectations. Turn on the EQ, set it to a low shelf, set the frequency to 362 Hz, set the Q to 60%, the gain to -5.8 decibels. Next, set the high band to roughly 4,281 Hz, set the Q to 34%, and the gain to 9 decibels. With that critical step out of the way, let's set our first macro. Set macro 1 to the wavetable position knob of both OSCs, set it to full depth. Turn the macro till it's a saw wave. Name this macro morph. Set macro 2 to the rate knob of the first LFO, full depth. Go into the mod matrix and set macro 2 as an auxiliary source on LFO 1 on warp A and B. This macro increases the rate of pulse width modulation while also increasing the amount LFO 1 is affecting the warp knobs of each oscillator. At low settings, the rate is low, and so is the overall amount of pulse width modulation. Name this macro PWN. Set macro 3 to the detune knobs of each oscillator. Set the depth to half on the first and more than half on the second. The differing amounts of detune layer a softer and then more aggressive version of the sound together. Name this macro HOV. Finally, let's set the rest of the effects and then the final macro. All of the effects contribute to one of two things. It's either to make the sound wide and lush, or it's to make the sound more aggressive. First, add chorus and make it the first in the effects chain. Set the rate to 20 Hz, delay 1 to 0.3 milliseconds, delay 2 to 1.7 milliseconds, depth to 4 milliseconds, depth to 62%, and LP at max right. Mix all the way to the left, and add macro 4, slightly less than 50% depth. Next, add distortion. Set the macro to hard clip, set EQ mode to pre, and turn it into a bandpass filter. Set frequency to 762 Hz and Q to 0.6. Set drive to max and mix to 33%. This distorts just the mids and adds them to the sound, creating more aggression, and makes the sound feel more solid instead of so lush and detuned. Set macro to the mix and set depth to 60%. Next, turn on hyperdimension and set rate to 7%, detune to 41%, unison to 3, mix all the way to the left, add macro 4 to the depth, just slightly more than 50%, set the size to 0, and then the mix to 0, and then put macro 4 on mix and set it to 25%. Next, turn on the compressor, set the threshold all the way to the right, ratio all the way to the left, gain at 7.6 decibels, turn on multiband mode. Then set macro 4 on the threshold, back about 25%. Set macro 4 on the ratio, forwards about 25%, and finally macro 4 on the gain, forwards about 25%. This lets us crossfade between no compression and heavy multiband compression with the turn of a knob. Now, name this macro FX. Okay, with the macros assigned, we just need to set them to my default positions. We already set morph to a saw wave, set pulse width modulation to the left if it isn't already. Pulse width modulation will add additional aggression to the sound, so if you want it, you can use it, but you'll need to mix out the extra lows it adds. Then I have HOV at about 60%, and finally I have FX at 40%. Finally, set the patch to mono and add some portamento, and you're done. Alright, I was just getting ready to play the MIDI file when I noticed that there was a small problem with the patch. If you go into FX, you need to switch the EQ from a high shelf to a peak. This is a really important step, otherwise the sound is way too bright. After that, you just need to go ahead and grab the MIDI file that I included in the folder, bring it into the project, and play it. Actually, there's one more thing. Hit legato so that the last notes slide. So there you have that. The only other thing there is to show you is movement on this envelope and how that'll change your overall sound. And changing the rate knob will make the whole process quicker or slower. All right, and trying to get us back closer, or we actually have it saved. Okay, that does it for this week's Serum tutorial. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel before heading off to play with the sound. Once again, I'm Dorian Day here for ADSR. See you next time.